Good afternoon, PSAIT Kanpur and Ted. I've been following many conversations, and what impresses me the most is every time we go, there are some deeper ideas which are being discussed and made so simple and easy to understand. So I'm trying to do the same because when the invite came and they said that you have to speak, but I said, which subject? This is a ma'am subject of your choice, and that's the most difficult task, to pick up a subject which you think you should be speaking on. If somebody gives you a subject, the job is easier, but then I was debating between a couple of subjects. So one was, of course, we are all very familiar with environmental degradation and climate change and SDGs in that regime. And the other one, which I felt as a politician and as an Indian, something which I need to clarify to people, where people don't seem to have followed the right message. That was the message of Ramrajya. So I'm standing in a state where Ram was born. I'm very close to the area where Saryu flows, on the banks of Ganges. Now, how do we look at Bhagwan Ram, whether we look at Ram from the academic historical perspective, or we look at Ram from the believer and the faithful's perspective? And each perspective will be right and correct. But I decided to look at it from a politician's perspective. And the politician's perspective, because I felt that is one area which has not really been discussed. And the message will be incomplete if we do not discuss that area. And that is the concept of Ramrajya. What is Ramrajya? Now, is Ramrajya a religious concept, or nothing can be more secular than good governance? And if Ramrajya represents good governance, I think every politician needs to follow the footsteps of Bhagwan Ram, or Lord Ram, or the King Ram, whichever way one may look at it. And Ramrajya means what? The spiritual authority which uses spirituality and a moral code of conduct in administration. And it is from this perspective I decided to dwell on the subject. I'll use a little bit of Sanskrit. Ram Rajya Nivasi, Tvam Ram Rajya Nivasi, Prokshare Te Shiram, which means you are the citizens of Ramrajya, and hold your head high. Now, hold your head high means what? Hold your head high not because you're arrogant, not because you should be proud, not because you do not follow ethics, you're very well off, but hold your head high because you follow the principles of justice. You are going to fight and wage war for justice. And is that not the concept of good governance we all want? That justice for all. And we all must fight for justice. We all must protect the poor and impoverished. We all must keep the dharma at the highest pedestal. And dharma not really in the context of dharma like religion, but dharma which is a godless morality, absolutely impeccable conduct, and rule of law. Rule of law or lack of rule of law is what creates the problem. So rule of law is something where right from correct traffic positions to everybody must pay their taxes, every child must get the meal, there should be no malnutrition, every woman should be protected. This is all rule of law. And that's what Ram emphasized on. So when we are discussing Ram, how have we made these concepts as communal is what keeps bothering me all the time. Because these are the most secular concepts anyone, any civilization can ever have. And this is what the whole issue of good governance is all about. And good governance is end of the day, inclusive. And that's exactly how Ram lived his life, which was an inclusive life. He set up the examples of highest sacrifice that a man can do. And he was not God who propagated dogma, that you can only be close to God if you do this or that, but somebody who showed that how every man, every woman, every individual has the capacity to become God. Because he never did anything which was out of the world. He did everything which every human being can do. And that is why he's called Maryada Purushottam, because he never transgressed the line of rule of law. And when it came to following the rule of law, he was a stickler who followed himself every law under the sun. And a king, a lawmaker, a monarchical structure, yet chose to listen to people right at the end and followed the law, resolved conflicts, restored faith by creating changes. And that is how the entire governance structure followed. Now, if we look at very closely, and I'll share something very, very close to my heart, and that is when I was growing up, I was born to a very religious mother. And she was someone who was constantly doing worship while even rolling the rotis and bread and everything, while washing, cleaning, she would be reciting something or the other, and that's the atmosphere I grew in, and I was completely the opposite. But whenever there were difficulties in life, so as a youngster, your parents teach you some tricks of life. So my mom said, you meditate on Ram, and everything will disappear, all difficulties and pains. So I started meditating. You can meditate on a dot, light, whatever. But she said, do it, Ram. And I tried to do it, and every time I did it, of course, I was calmer, I was better. But every session, post every session, I had this lingering doubt. How am I praying to this person who did not treat his wife right? I had this huge, huge, huge issue when I was growing up. And it took me a long time to reach that level of understanding and trying to distinguish between rights and wrongs. And I came to a conclusion, and I started understanding this deeply, that when you are a son, you follow certain rules. When the entire public is with you, you yet choose to follow the route which your father has assigned you and a task which has been given. You leave everything and go to forest. You protect the honor of your wife. You save her from a demon like Ravan. You come back, and then some inane person, a washerman, makes a comment about your wife, and you abandon her. Made absolutely no sense. And that too for a king. But then I understood the concept of rule of law. You can't play with law. You need to restore the faith of people. The trial must happen. And when there is a conflict between your personal self, your Rajdharm will take over. To restore the faith of people, to shun all the whispers. That's what Ram did at a great personal cost. Because being a king, he never remarried. He never had another woman. He remained devoted to his wife, who on the surface of it had been abandoned. And subsequently, he followed what was the dharma of Raja, to quell the whispers and restore the dignity of Sita. And it is in this context, people of Ayodhya, who unwelcomed Sita, subsequently started saying Sita Ram and not Ram Sita. Because Sita had to be given that place of pride and that respect which she deserved. And Sita, on her account, an embodiment of virtue to an extent which is unthinkable. A princess by birth, someone who was a queen, someone who didn't have to go to the forest but chose to go to the forest, someone who was powerful enough to hold the bow of Shiva. And that's a fantastic story that as a young woman, she was told she had the duty to do Swachh Abhiyan in the palace. And when she was doing Swachh Abhiyan, she held the bow with one hand and cleaned it with another. And everybody rushed to the parents to say, Sunaina and to Janak, that your daughter has picked up Shiva's bow. And she was the one who said, I mean, for her it was a child's play. She said, so what's the big deal? I'll do it again. And mother said, who will marry her? She's so powerful. So father's response was, somebody equal or better. And that's where the Swamvar happened. And that's how. So Sita in her own right was no less than Ram, but a match equal to him. And as a princess, she could have chosen to stay with Lakshman, who was like a brother to her, Bharat, who was like a brother to her, Sugriv, who was like a brother to her, go back to her own parents' home. But what did she choose? She chose Balmiki's ashram and bring up her own children. So the entire tale is tale of sacrifice, not a tale of consumption, not a tale of using, not a tale of using and throwing people. So whenever one is in pain and one goes through difficult times, one can always go back and start reading, whether it's Balmiki's Ramayana or Ramcharitramanas or any other version. Because you will always find that far more than us, even the spiritual head, a God, was put through these travails. We are nobody, and these travails are no good. And why should we bother? Just focus on the job at hand and continue to do. God is there to look after you and protect you from all these things. On the governance aspect, one is inclusiveness. Look at the entire life of Ram, from Bhil to Kevat to Shabri, where he's even had tasted the bear and everything, showed how inclusive he made the entire society to be. And inclusion, end of the day, is job of every government. Every government must mainstream people who have been left away from governance. So govern those who have not been governed so far. Mainstream those who have been left out of the regulations and rules. And this is the job of every government, every politician who has to reach out. It's duty, he's or she is duty bound to reach out to those who have not been reached. And inclusion is what the entire life of Ram, episode after episode, can be seen. So inclusion, equality, how he's shown to hug Kevat, the exchange of dialogue between them, conversation between him and Lakshman with Shabri. Bhil, again, Aborigines, which we can today relate to in more westernized language. The people who were living in jungles, not that they were uncivilized. They were civilized people in their own way, their own methodology. But if you have to mainstream them, how you make them your equal and you treat the head as a king. Not kill them, not take over their lands, not try to change their way of living, but make it inclusive. Isn't inclusion a part of good governance? It is. Gender justice. We are all fighting for gender justice. Ample examples in the story of Ramayana, in Ram's life. When gender justice, you can see how he treats Mandodari, Ravan's wife. Put away all the stigma from her. Tara, how due to circumstances she'd been taken away and all kinds of wrongs happened with her. Brought her back, gave her the dignity, respect. Ahilya, who on the charges of infidelity had become a rock, touched her, gave her the dignity, restored her back to Rishi Gautam. Gender justice. Then justice, merit-oriented society, where the story of Ramayana again in great detail talks about merit-oriented society. So when Ram is sent away, so that the kingdom could be restored to none other than his brother, and that is Bharat, and that all the things happen because of his stepmother seeking kingdom for her son. Yet, Bharat goes back to his brother in the forest, asks him to come back. Brother refuses that I have to obey the dictum of my father and mother. So Bharat goes back, keeps his shoes or khadaam on the throne, and starts ruling. Not because he was a bad administrator. I think he was equally good, accomplished administrator. He was a great warrior. And yet he knew that it is not me who deserves this. It is my older brother who deserves this. It's rightfully his, and I cannot take over. How many examples do we get how many such examples do we get today? That people of their own volition will give up because that is wrong. Somebody else deserves it more than you. And that merit-based society is what Ramayana enshrines and Ramrajya talks about. Again, Ramrajya talks about few major ills, Ravan with 10 heads. 10 heads are what? Kam, which is material desires and sexual desires. Krodh, which is anger. Mad is arrogance. Moh is attachment. Lobh is greed. Paschatap is resentment. Irsha is jealousy. Fear, bhay. Inertia, which is jad. And with all these wrongs, don't we see the 10-headed Ravan even in today's life and governance models? We see corruption. What is corruption? Are we not supposed to fight lobh? End of the day, corruption is the result of greed. End of the day, all the terrorist activities, rioting, etc., burning, all that happens because of unmatched violence, krodh, anger, jealousy, non-inclusion. So all these wrongs, the 10-headed Ravan, today also exists in the form of poverty, corruption, bad governance, non-inclusion, and all the right things. Any right-thinking government will have to incorporate these aspects into good governance. And for me, Ramrajya is secular governance, and that method which needs to be followed by all politicians to make society more livable and to have a government which is more accountable, transparent, and answerable to people. Thank you.